Most people don't realize this, but many cities already have shovel-ready transit corridors hidden in plain sight. No tunneling, no land acquisition, no eminent domain. The hard part is already done. Yet, instead of using these for transit, cities often take the fast and politically easy option, converting these corridors into recreational trails. Trails are great, but when they replace transit instead of coexist with it, cities miss a once-in-a-generation chance to build real mobility. And that matters, because transit corridors don't just move people, they shape access, housing, and how cities grow. This isn't hypothetical. Cities everywhere are making these decisions right now. Some cities already built rail and trail side by side. Others converted their corridors into trails only, and a few are still debating what to do as the window quietly closes. Because once a corridor becomes a beloved public space, adding transit later gets more expensive, more political, and more disruptive. Atlanta is one of the clearest examples. In the late 1990s, the city was growing fast. People were moving in, traffic was getting worse. Marta's rail network hadn't expanded in decades, and Atlanta was surprisingly park poor for a city its size. That's when a Georgia Tech graduate student named Ryan Grayville proposed reusing a 22-mile freight rail loop to build light rail with trails and parks alongside it. Not rail or trail, rail and trail together. The idea took off. Politicians backed it, the public supported it, and advocacy groups saw it as a way to solve multiple problems at once: transportation, parks, redevelopment, climate, all using infrastructure Atlanta already had. So far so good, but once implementation studies began, including the Trust for Public Lands Emerald-Nicholas report, they recommended building the trails, greenways, and redevelopment first, and dealing with transit later. In 2005, the City Council adopted a redevelopment plan that reflected that sequencing. And that's exactly what happened. The trails moved ahead fast. They were cheaper, easier, and came with immediate public support. The BeltLine became a national model for public space and redevelopment. The transit component never got the same momentum. Rail required dedicated funding, environmental review, and coordination between the city, MARTA, and Georgia DOT, and far more political will than the trail needed. The plan was still rail and trail, but the order mattered. 2 decades later, that sequencing has consequences. The trail loop is mostly built and widely loved. The light rail component is still unfunded and politically stuck, even as Atlanta's population and traffic have continued to grow. And the longer the BeltLine exists as a trail, the harder it becomes to add the rail that was always part of the vision. Even though most segments preserved a transit envelope, including the east side, which reached final design and was seen as the easiest piece to start. That space is now part of Atlanta's public realm. People walk on it, developers build next to it, and neighborhoods have grown attached to the tranquil, car-free greenway they already have. In 2025, the politics finally caught up to reality. Atlanta's mayor cut the plans to extend the Atlanta streetcar along the east side trail of the BeltLine. The segment with preserved right-of-way, design funded, and engineering completed, positioned to compete for federal grants, was shelved just as it was ready to break ground. This is how cities get trapped. The trail succeeded, the transit didn't. And the longer the gap between the two grows, the less likely the second one ever happens. And it's not like rail and trail together is some untested idea. In New York, the QueensLink proposal envisions transit and trail sharing the same corridor before that window closes. In Washington, D.C., the Purple Line is being built next to the Capitol Crescent Trail, and in the San Francisco North Bay, the small line runs with a multi-use greenway beside it. Meanwhile, Atlanta keeps growing, traffic keeps getting worse, major job centers are popping up along the BeltLine. All of this makes the original transit component more valuable and more politically difficult than ever. So, what did Atlanta lose by not building a rail piece when the window was open? Today, the BeltLine corridor links some of the fastest growing job centers in the entire city: Midtown, Ponce, Inman Park, Old Fourth Ward, and Buckhead. Housing went up, offices opened, restaurants thrived. The most shift never came, because the trains never arrived. Marta's rail network is radial. It takes you into the core, but not around it. The BeltLine was supposed to be that missing circumferential connection. Without it, those job centers are still overwhelmingly car-dependent. The highways are still clogged, and the corridors that were supposed to relieve that pressure never got the upgrade. And here's the irony. The BeltLine shows exactly where the transit should go. You can literally watch the desired lines in real time. People walk, jog, bike, and commute along the corridor every day. Demand is there, the right-of-way is there. The only missing piece is a rail. Atlanta built a ring, but forgot the trains. Cities don't just choose whether to build transit or not. They choose a sequence, and that sequence shapes everything that comes after. When a city builds rail and trail together, the corridor becomes a mobility project. When it builds the trail first and promises rail later, the trail often becomes a project, and the window for transit begins to close. Not because anyone planned for it to close, but because politics, expectations, and land use settle around the new status quo. That's what makes corridors like this so valuable and so fragile. They are one of the few ways cities can add real transit capacity without tunneling for miles or buying up entire blocks. Lose them, and you lose the easiest transit project the city will ever get. The lesson isn't that cities should not build trails. Trails are great. The lesson is that trails shouldn't come at the cost of transit, especially when both can fit. Because once a corridor becomes a beloved trail, adding transit later doesn't just require engineering, it requires undoing a world people have already adjusted to. For Atlanta, that choice is now forcing a harder question. What does growth look like without the transit piece the BeltLine was supposed to deliver? For other cities watching, the question is even bigger. If you had a corridor like this, would you use it for mobility, or would you build a park and hope transit shows up later? To be fair to Atlanta, the rail idea isn't completely dead. Agencies and advocacy groups are still studying how transit could fit into parts of the BeltLine. The right-of-way is technically preserved in most segments, and everyone knows Atlanta's growth will eventually demand better mobility than trails alone. Atlanta's mayor says he is still open to transit on the BeltLine, but wants to reprioritize to other segments first. But transit advocates have been skeptical since the East Side project was cancelled by him at the moment it was ready to break ground. The question isn't whether transit would help, it's whether it can still happen before the window closes. If you're curious how a different city is trying to make both rail and trail happen at the same time, I have a video about the QueensLink project in New York. It's a similar corridor, also faces competition against plans that wants to build the trail first. But the window there is still open to transit, at least for now. And if you want to dig deeper into how cities grow and make decisions like this, I'll link a few of my favorite urban planning books in the description and pinned comment. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.